Hello, I'm Dango Rose. Welcome to the Mountaineer Podcast, where everybody's listening. The Mountaineer brings you the latest news of the Peak to Peak region, in print, online, through our podcast, social media, and special publications. Now, listen in to the latest news of the area with our local journalists.
Soaking up this pain so I can feel it. It's sending off on its way, but I don't need it. Standing in the rain and then I see you shining through a rainbow's view.
The song that you are currently listening to is called The Caregiver. It's the latest single from Mike Lamatola, which you can stream along with his previous releases wherever you get your music. You can learn more about Mike Lamatola by going to his website, mikelamatola.com. He'll be one of the musicians performing as part of the Netherland Fire Benefit at the Spirit Hound in Lyons on Sunday, October 26th, which starts at noon and ends at 7:45. Confirmed artists include Lamatola, Colin Musselman, Renee Moffat, Jake Legg, Jay Stott, Elbow Brothers, Derek Damesole, and Mighty Holler. The suggested donation is $10, and all proceeds will be donated to a local GoFundMe to support business owners and employees affected by the Lakeview Fire in Netherland. Be sure to head to 4196 Ute Highway in Lyons to attend the event.
I bring you home, you're still bleeding. I pray alone, the pain's receding. You're not on your own and life is fleeting. I'll take all my days with you. I think about
Hello there, everybody. My name is Jamie Lammers, and welcome to the Mountaineer Podcast, where today I'm bringing you a Mountain Folktales segment. Before we get into today's interview, if you haven't subscribed to the Mountaineer and you want to support local news from peak to peak, be sure to head to the mtnear.com and click on the subscribe button in the top right corner of our homepage. From there, you'll get full access to our digital archives and scanned copies of our physical newspaper. And you can choose to send a physical subscription to your mailbox or to the mailbox of someone that you love. If you're interested in being involved with the newspaper and or the podcast in any way, including for advertising purposes, be sure to head to the mtnear.com/advertise to learn what advertising packages are available, or reach out to a Mountaineer staff member. Email info@themountaineer.com to reach our editor-in-chief, Barbara Hart, media@themountaineer.com to reach out to myself, or frontdesk@themountaineer.com to ask any questions you have. You can also call us directly at 303-810-5409. And finally, our top story today, brought to you by Brittany Wagner.
Our top story today comes from Jamie Lammers, Enchanted Forest Visit Eldora. Now, in 2025, the Nature Center is nearly complete, but with construction still in progress, the Enchanted Forest still cannot be hosted there. Lining up perfectly with the organization's 30th anniversary, the Enchanted Forest moved to a new location this year, Eldora. On Saturday, September 27th, Wild Bear hosted the 22nd annual Enchanted Forest from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Netherlands Ski Resort, surrounding the area outside the Caribou Lodge. The event hosted local vendors, live music, magic acts, face painting, and tours through a forest to meet the animals that call Colorado home. The Nature Center anticipates that the 23rd annual Enchanted Forest will be moved back to the land patch hosting the new building, as construction is projected to be completed in 2026. For the full story, you can find it in this week's Mountaineer or at themountaineer.com.
Of course, the Enchanted Forest event was hosted before the primary nature center in Netherland was destroyed by the Lakeview Fire. This weekend, on Saturday, October 25th, Wild Bear will be hosting a memorial service in Chipeta Park for the animal ambassadors that were lost in the fire. If you want to attend the memorial, head to Chipeta Park at 2 p.m. You can also directly support other businesses affected by the Lakeview fire by heading to the Netherland Fire Benefit Concert at the Spirit Hound in Lyons on Sunday, October 26th, starting at noon and ending at 7:45 p.m. It's located at 4196 Ute Highway in Lyons. And now, let's get into our primary segment. Our guest this time around, do you mind introducing yourself real quick?
My name is Leslie Finn, and I live in Gold Hill, have for about 40 years, and born and raised in Boulder, second-generation Boulderite. And yeah, I work for the Gold Hill Fire Department and clean the hotel. The Bluebird Lodge is my little house.
Now, this was not originally supposed to be a Mountain Folktale segment. I originally interviewed you to promote a book signing that you had at the Bluebird Lodge.
Yes, on September 8th. And we will have light appetizers, but that depends on the chef. And probably last about, I want to say 2 hours. We'll do signing and I'll do a little reading, and then people like to ask questions.
Of course, that date has now long passed. In fact, I recorded this interview a month earlier than that on August 8th. However, that means I can now promote the book itself, When the Skies Was Fair and Blue. So, Leslie, can you talk to us a bit about what the book is about?
So I have to start from the very beginning because it's probably the most important part to me. So a gentleman named Eugene Field, who was a poet and author in the 1800s, he wrote kids' poetry like Little Boy Blue, Come Blow Your Horn, and Wee Willie Winkie, and wrote novels. And he used to stay at the Bluebird Lodge, which was then, I want to say, called the Wentworth House. And I may be wrong on that fact. It might have been the Marshall House by that point. But he used to stay there when he would write for a Denver newspaper, and we can't dial in which newspaper at this point in time, so we just say a Denver newspaper. But he wrote a poem about the chef that worked at the hotel, which was built in 1872, called Casey's Table d'Hôte. And table d'hôte means everything's on the table, family style. And that's the premise by which the Gold Hill Inn serves their meals. But anyway, in this poem, Casey is the hero, and his whole life is kind of portrayed in this poem, along with kind of the history of Gold Hill, stuff that was in town at the time. And it's an archaic language. It's very hard to read, but you kind of get the gist when you run over it. But anyway, so Casey is one of the lead characters, and his young friend was accused of murdering her stepfather in a mining accident, masterminding some sort of a cave-in or something to kill her stepfather, who was cruel. So the first book involves somewhat the investigation. There's a lot of Gold Hill town history involved in that. I take my information from books by Sylvia Pedham, who is a local author also, and she has done a couple of history books on Gold Hill, and then utilize a mining accident from her books in my story. And so the girl eventually, Samantha Akins is her name, eventually gets arrested for the murder of her stepfather at his funeral, at the end of his funeral. And then there's a whole trial process that goes in. So that's book one in a nutshell. And book two, When Skies Was Fair and Blue, is them coming back from Denver after the trial. And it starts off fairly benign, but there's in the history books, and my great aunt was a part of this, on a train coming out of Denver. The train sparked a fire, and so I bring this into the book. So the train sparks a fire that takes aim at Gold Hill, and suddenly Samantha Akins and the hero from book one, James Lefebvre, who is the mine inspector and kind of takes over her trial defense, and Casey, are all thrust into this crazy thing of a wildfire. So there's, in that process, people die. All the local towns kind of get involved in that. And I don't want to give away too much, but it culminates from there. And then we learn more about James Lefebvre in book two also, where in book one we get, a gist of the fact that he's from a Lakota Sioux mom and a French noble father, but we learn more about him in book two. So that's another place where it goes. And we learn more about Casey. Some of the stuff from the poem is brought into book two. And yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell.
And how long did the writing process take for this book, When the Skies Was Fair and Blue, and the first book, Oh Them Days on Red Hoss Mountain?
So I want to say that it probably took me a total of 5 years, I'm just kind of guessing here, to write actually both books. It was going to be one book, And then it just got too long. It was like 170,000 words. And I was warned when I was trying to publish the first time that they pretty much won't take a book past 70,000 words for a first-time author, which may be true or not, but that's what I was finding when I was trying to get it going. So I handed it to somebody in two parts, in part 1 and part 2, and they suggested that I go ahead and make it into 2 books. So in book 2, I then took the opportunity to add in more information and build up James LaFlabe's character a little bit. So that's kind of the process there. But I want to say probably 5 years. Trying to get them published is a whole nother process. So.
And what are your personal connections to Gold Hill that inspired you to write these books?
So I married into the Finn family that owns the Gold Hill Inn in 1984, and I had known the family prior to that, and my father, who was a county assessor and started off as a newspaper kid and blah, blah, this was his favorite place to come. And I was always fascinated by these 2 giant log buildings in town, never expecting to actually end up being married into the family that owns these 2 log buildings. I mean, that was serendipitous beyond. And when I first married Christopher, the hotel was in shambles. They had lived in there. They had people kind of squat in there. They had tried to do a bed and breakfast with it in 1962, and it's just too cold to keep people, to have it open year round. So we refurbished it. And we refinished furniture, and we dealt with all these strange events that happened, ghost story type events, which we'll talk about in book 3. But just weird stuff happened. And I just had a massive fascination for this Eugene Field guy who wrote this poem and used to stay in the hotel. And I keep looking for his signature in a book. And somebody said they do have one at the History Museum in Boulder, that they have a picture of his signature from one of the hotel registries. But I have not found it yet. So anyway, the table d'hôte thing, when I first started working for the Finns, that was like a strange concept. It was hard to talk about or hard to understand. I didn't understand the wording, blah, blah, blah. It's a Welsh phrase. And then when I started working there and it became clear where we served the vegetables on the side after, with the meal, it became apparent. And they've really stuck with that format for your inside dining. And there's a picture of Eugene in the building. And one of the ghost stories that we get is that this woman, this is when we were doing the bed and breakfast, and there was a group of people staying in the lodge, and they had just gone to bed, and the gentleman got up to go to the restroom, and the woman hears the door open back up again, and she sees this guy standing in the doorway with a bedroll under his arm, a vest, and a little round bowler hat. And she's telling me this story in the morning. She screamed, woke up the hotel. I mean, she was flat out, swore to God this guy was in the room. They looked through the hotel, couldn't find anybody. So in the morning, she's telling me this story while I'm serving him breakfast, and I brought her over to the inn to show her the picture of Eugene. And she kind of punched me in the shoulder, and she said, "That's the guy. How did you let him get in?" And I'm like, oh my goodness. He's dead. There was this total disconnect between what was real and what wasn't real, but there's a picture of Eugene, and that's the guy she saw. So that was kind of what drew me to him, and he does come into the book a couple times, but I try not to dwell on because he's more of a historical person, and I don't know a lot about it. But anyway, that's what started this. And then there's all sorts of, I've been working in the lodge forever, and there's a great affinity for the building and the history of the building and what it used to look like before. There was a dance hall on the 3rd floor, just all this kind of history that came about, and I just started writing the book in my head as I'd make beds, and that's how it evolved.
Do you have any other books published out there?
No, I have written another book that I have not released because, I went the old school way of trying to get it published by sending it out to queries, a million queries. And then I lost interest in it because I had kids and got too busy. So I have another book that I will eventually get out here, but it has nothing to do with Gold Hill. It's more Aspen related. But I've always written. I've written since I was a little kid. I had a 2nd grade teacher that had this box of pictures, and at break time, free time, we got to do whatever we wanted. And I would always go get a picture out of the box and write a little story about it. And she would read them to class. And so that's kind of how this all started. I journal, but I've always been writing in my stories here and there and poetry here and there and stuff I just never really tried to publish. But this one had a special meaning just because I wanted to get the history of Gold Hill put into a more fictional type novel, and that's what people are liking the most about the book. That's the best feedback that I get from people, is that they've never read Red Rocks to Riches by Sylvia Plath. had them. They've never read the little story of Gold Hill. So they're getting all this information that I found from these other books in this historical fiction, and they're loving it because they didn't know these things.
And what have you loved most about being able to share this book with people and connect with people through the book?
Well, I tell you, I get surprising feedback because I'm just writing the story. And I get very good feedback from people that they just absolutely fell in love with the characters and they love the history and they can't wait to read book 2. And it's been encouraging to me because despite the fact that you cannot get a book published in the traditional way unless you are, according to a very nice gentleman from a large publishing company, wrote me a nice letter. He said, unless you're already famous, like an actor or a sports hero or already have a book out, we're just not taking chances on anybody right now. If you write one and then it becomes something, then we may look at you. But the whole idea of publishing has changed, and that's when I went the route of self-publishing, which is a whole nother process of crazy. And I had, 50 people show up to my first book signing, which was mind-blowing. I did not expect that. And like I say, people keep emailing me, when's book 2 coming out? So it's nice to have this kind of recognition for book 2, this push for book 2, because people are waiting for it and may help book 1 too. But I've gotten positive feedback on Amazon, and I'm not, this is part of the thing. It's like, I have to get these things out of my head and onto paper. They live in there and I have to get them out. I don't have a choice. So this is not like a massive money-making operation for me. It's more just sharing the story with other people. That's the core of it. And if people enjoy it, great. It's perfect.
And we've talked about the connections to the community that inspired these books, but I wanted to ask, what connections to the community have most personally affected you?
I want to say, I think that what really connected me the most with the community is when I bought the Gold Hill General Store and had that for 7 years while I was dealing with wee ones. And it was an actual store, like a co-op type, like the Netherland Co-op. We kind of worked with them too at one point. As the companies kept increasing the amounts of stuff that we had to buy because grocery stores were getting mad at these little co-ops, we worked with other places like the Jamestown Mercantile, which my cousin owns. So that in of itself, it became the place for people to gather. There was the coffee clutch in the morning with there was all dudes, by the way. The coffee clutch was all dudes. And it just became a very social core to the community. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. The only reason I sold it was because my kid became 2 years old and I could not manage trying to keep track of him and run the store at the same time. But that was a huge connection to the community. And then in the meantime, I joined the fire department. I served as the town chair at one point. I served on the historic zone board at one point. But joining the fire department set me off in another path of education and taking fire classes and working towards my squad boss and working with, we open a task book and you get all this stuff signed off from working other fires in the area. And so that put me hardcore in the community too, because most of what we do, I'm an EMT, mostly what we do are medical calls. So again, I'm connected to the community there because I respond to their houses on their worst day. So I'm fully ingrained in this community now. And I tell you what, for years and years, I never thought I would be. And I still have a massive attachment to Boulder, to the city of Boulder, just because that's where I was born and raised. That's where my dad was born and raised. That's where his dad was born and raised. So I still have that connection. And when people ask where I'm from, I don't say Gold Hill. I say Boulder, which makes my kids mad. But I definitely am still with the fire department. I still respond on calls. And I just feel like I'm part of the community now. So it's been a long few years. Long 40 years.
Of course, this is no longer relevant, but I did ask Leslie if there was anything else she wanted people to know about the book signing.
I will probably ask that people RSVP, because if I get up to 100 in the hotel, it's going to be a rough ride, especially if the weather's not nice, because we're pushing it by September 8th. But yes, people will need to RSVP for the book signing, and it'll be pretty chill. I may not be able to get everybody's book signed. I may have to, it was tough getting 50 people's books signed and still do a little reading. So we'll see how this works this time, but I may just sign them in advance. But that would be the only thing, just there will be an RSVP, and I'll have this sent out through, well, obviously through you, but I'll have it sent out to our town meeting resources too.
Is there anything else about the book in general that you wanted to mention?
Well, I think that one of the things that, I didn't mention is that, and this may not be important for you, but I've had to manipulate the fiction part of this for the train to come up to Gold Hill, because at the time in 1883, the train stopped in the town of Sunset. It hadn't actually come up to the Mount Alto picnic area yet. And in the historic books, the train went up the Switzerland Trail, which is now the Switzerland Trail, and then it went over to Ward. And then there were spurs off of that, this train went everywhere. Over to Caribou, Netherlands, the Sourdough Trail is part of the Switzerland Trail. And I didn't go into that in the book at all because it just got too complicated. But if people go, wait a minute, the train stopped. We didn't go all the way up there in 1883. Yeah, they're right. It didn't. But it just was one of those things that I had to manipulate, so.
Still, the history is incredibly fascinating. I couldn't help but look at some facts about Eugene Field while I was conducting this interview. Man, he has an extensive history.
Oh, yeah. We've actually tried to tie him into Oscar Wilde. There's this other thing that goes on up here where we do these murder mysteries, and the authors, the people that write the murder mysteries, we tried to tie them together. I think we did in one of the murder mysteries fictionally, but yeah, he was a big deal in the days, and we've got a whole series of his books that are ancient age. Literally from the 1800s. And I didn't realize when I first started doing this, because I always was told he was just a poet. I did not know that he'd actually written novels. So that was an interesting find for me when I was looking into all this. So, yeah, and he used to hang out up here at the hotel and write for the Denver paper. That we know we found that historically somewhere. I can't remember where all the details came from at this point in time, but my mother-in-law did a bunch of looking for him at one point too, because what we were trying to do was to tie a death into the hotel that might be creating some of the paranormal stuff, which, we've had paranormal investigators come in there and have found zilch, but we've had some wild stories from people. It's just like, wow. But nobody has died in the hotel that we can see, so.
Honestly, in my opinion, that's a relief.
I know. And Eugene, that's who I talk to when I'm in the hotel. If something weird happens, I'm always scolding Eugene. Or Mrs. Sherwood, who's the other historical picture of this, the historical part of this whole operation was a group of women from Chicago bought the hotel in the early 1900s and created a women's club. So there was like teachers and nurses and whatnot. And they are partly involved in getting a Chautauqua set up down in Boulder. And they had a cabin down there, the Bluebird cabin. So that's a ghost that people have seen is Mrs. Sherwood. But that's neither here nor there either. That's just a side point. But those guys, the ghosts will come in book 3 because I do have to do something with the ghost stories. So.
Yeah, is there anything else in general that you want to add before we sign off?
Yeah, it's, I could go way more into what book 2 is about, but, I don't want to spoil it. It's a smaller book, but it would have been just too big to make it be one book. It just would have been massive. So, and it's less expensive also because it's smaller, but it does have more information, more historical stuff, and yeah.
In that case, I think those are the big questions that I have on my end.
Well, no problem. I was honored to be asked, and it's always fun to talk about my stuff. I feel like I have to rein in because I could really babble on for I could get way carried away here when I do an interview, but I try to keep it down to a dull roar so it's not too boring for people. But we definitely have a lot of history up here, and like you guys do over there. Good heavens, Caribou was massive. Caribou was a town up there.
Thank you so much, Leslie, for coming on board and joining us for the podcast. You can purchase her books, Oh Them Days on Red Hoss Mountain and When the Skies Was Fair and Blue, by heading to ohthemdaysonredhossmountain.com. The website will be directly linked in the podcast episode description. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in to this Mountain Folk Tales edition of the Mountain Ear Podcast. I'll be back very soon with another community-centered episode of the Mountain Ear Podcast. In the meantime, if you want to share this episode or others around with whoever you see fit, be sure to find our podcast archive by scrolling down to the Mountain Ear Media section of our homepage, or finding our podcast's main hub at the mtnearpodcast.buzzsprout.com. Of course, you can also listen to it wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, Podchaser, and subscribe to it wherever you want to listen to the podcast. If you scroll down to Mountain Ear Media, you'll also be able to find our Facebook and our YouTube. And if you want to follow us on Instagram, head to @mtn.ear. Again, let us know if you're interested in being involved with the newspaper or the podcast in any way by reaching out to info@themountaineer.com, media@themountaineer.com, or frontdesk@themountaineer.com, or by calling 303-810-5409. And finally, also be sure to head to our website, themtnear.com, if you want to submit events to our events calendar, if you want to get the word out there about an event coming to your venue or the community. I'll see you guys next time. Have a great rest of your day.
Sometimes I wish I could be singing to the trees, rhyming with the breeze instead of worrying what you think.
The song that you are currently listening to is called Singing to the Trees. It's a song by Derek Damesole from his latest album, Someday I'll Be Happy and Rule This World of Mine, which you can find along with his previous releases wherever you get your music. You can learn more about his music by going to his website, derekdamesolemusic.com. He'll be one of the musicians performing at the Netherland Fire Benefit at the Spirit Hound in Lyons on Sunday, October 26th, from noon to 7:45 p.m., along with Mike Lamatola, Colin Musselman, Renee Moffat, Jake Legg, Jay Stott, Elbow Brothers, and Mighty Holler. The suggested donation is $10, and all proceeds will be donated to a local GoFundMe to support business owners and employees affected by the Lakeview Fire in Netherland. Be sure to head to 4196 Ute Highway in Lyons to attend the event.
Could be worse. Why can't it just get better? Stacking alphabet letters, trying to write my way out. Stacking alphabet letters, trying to write my way out.
And that's it for our show. Subscribe online to get more access to more news, weekly updates to our community calendar, and a link to our YouTube channel by visiting themountaineer.com. Be sure to use the coupon code PODCAST when subscribing for a 10% discount, only available to our listeners. If you are in the local Peak to Peak area, be sure to pick up a print edition of The Mountaineer at a local business. I'm Dango Rose. Thank you for listening.